National Fisherman and Pacific Marine Expo are proud supporters of the Galley Stories podcast, as we make similar efforts to highlight the people and topics that define commercial fishing. You can see what that looks like in print and online all year long, as well as every November in Seattle when this community comes together at PME. Check out nationalfisherman.com and pacificmarineexpo.com to learn more.
Hello and welcome to Galley Stories, stories of the Bering Sea and beyond, hosted by Mark Kaler. My name is Penka Jane, podcast Deckhand and longtime listener. We'd thank you to subscribe to the podcast and leave us a review. Here's today's catch.
Hello guys, welcome to another installment of Galley Stories, stories of the Bering Sea and beyond. I am your host, Mark Kaler. Today we've got Deckhand and advocate for Bristol Bay, Nels Ure. How are you doing, Nels?
I'm doing great today, Mark. How are you?
Good, good. Let's dive into where were you born and what was your first introduction into commercial fishing?
So I was born in Anchorage, Alaska. My parents used to live in Naknek for the first few years of my life before we relocated to Kodiak, where I spent a lot of my formal education, or K through 12 education. My first introduction to commercial fishing on the periphery of my life was just growing up in a fishing community like Kodiak, but when I first got the experience of working on it was on the back deck of my father's vessel in Bristol Bay. It was called the Coachman II, and that started when I was 14 years old.
And what was your job on the boat?
Well, the first year was pretty much just trying to understand what this whole fishery was. As a kid, before I was allowed to go up, I always had dreams about coming to Bristol Bay and fishing with my dad, but really no concept of what it was like, as most young kids who have fishing fathers do. And so my first job on the vessel was, cooking, was bleeding fish, was getting out there and trying to learn how to pick. And after that first season at 14, I was hooked. And by the time I was end of my second year, when I was 15, finally became full share. And since then, I've been fishing with him until recently, when I switched and started fishing for my father-in-law. Yeah.
Oh. Is there a story there?
Oh, there's a story there, Mark. I feel very fortunate. I guess maybe we should start with what the sea's given to me first, if that's okay.
Sure.
So, I've been fishing in Bristol Bay for about 14 years, because I'm 28 now. And the sea has given me quite a bit here in Bristol Bay. When I was about 22, I met my wife here in Naknek, and she is a Naknek local proper, and so she grew up fishing as well, and we really hit it off, wrote love letters through tenders to each other all summer. Not sure how many tendermen may have opened those letters and read those love letters, but that's where our love story began, and about 3 years ago we tied the knot officially. And that same summer we tied the knot, we welcomed in our first little one into the world, our newest deckhand. But with that, when my wife was pregnant, she was not able to fish on her father's boat anymore. So you want to know who took her spot, Mark?
You did.
I took her spot, yes. And so I don't know if that was planned. I don't know if that was just the way it worked. But since she was due in August, she was too pregnant to fish on the boat, and I aptly took her spot, which was great. My father-in-law has a great operation, and that's the story behind me starting to fish for him. And so, yeah.
So what was it like fishing with your dad?
In retrospect, it was amazing. If you would have asked 14 through maybe 17-year-old Nels if he loved fishing with his dad, I would probably at the time say, oh no, I really like the paycheck. I loved the work, but when you fish for a family member, there's the layer of being there for work, and being there for your job, but also the layer of it's your parent, and sometimes your parents just really frustrate you, or you wonder why they do certain things, or they get on your nerves a little bit. So I think in retrospect, it was the most wonderful years of my life. As a teenager with not a lot of understanding of the world, I probably would have had a different opinion back then.
I got to ask you. Your name's very unique.
Mm-hmm.
Where does it come from? What's the story behind that?
My family is on both sides are Scandinavian. both of my families back at the turn of the 20th century in the late 1890s, early 1910s, immigrated from Norway over into Minnesota on the Norwegian Ridge, and so Nels comes from Norway, and my brother is Stig, and both very Scandinavian, Viking-esque names, I guess.
Do you speak Norwegian?
Jeg snakker litt norsk. I've studied a little bit of Norwegian and visited distant relatives over there in the motherland, but not fluent by any means, just enough to get by and maybe say a few cuss words. Who knows?
Yep. That's how I am with Spanish. So, okay. So you've expressed what the sea has given to you, but what's been your best time at sea?
I think the best time that I've had at sea, I've done a few fisheries. I did some halibut out of Kodiak, tendered before, did some squid down in California, but Bristol Bay is been the place that I continually come back to. And my best memories on the water are getting those few seasons where it was just my father, my brother, and I on the boat. Just really this way to connect and solidify that like family bond, getting to work with them, getting to provide for our family. Those are very formative memories in my early life, and I think have really defined what I want for my family now, and also just giving me that work ethic. But I guess I didn't answer your question on what's the most beautiful time out on the water, and it has to be fishing in Ugashik. That's where we grew up fishing, and that district is incredibly beautiful, but it can be incredibly brutal for weather too. I think a memory that comes to mind is an early morning set. We were upriver near the in-river district line, and the sun came up kind of behind the Alaska Peninsula mountain range, and behind Chiganogik volcano, this volcano that occasionally vents, and the sky just lit up into these crazy crimson, orange, and purple hues, and we had the net in the water, and it just started plinking and bubbling and boiling, and there were no boats around, and it just kind of felt like we were the only ones there. It was kind of towards the end of the fishing season too, but that was one of the most beautiful memories that I have of just harvesting this wild fish in this wild place with crazy fiery sunrise and a venting volcano. I mean, you can't make that stuff up. It just feels like you're in a National Geographic magazine sometimes.
How awesome.
Yeah.
No pictures, right? You're all just locked in the...
Oh, I actually do have some pictures of that morning that I'd be more than happy to share with you if you'd like.
Incredible. That would be great.
Yeah, definitely.
Maybe we'll put that as your photo when we release.
Yeah, that sounds great.
So, I want to go back to squid a little bit. In 94 episodes, we've never had anybody explain the process.
Oh, gosh.
So, walk us through, well, first of all, how did you end up on a squid boat? And what was that like? What was your job? And what was the experience like?
So, I'm a little bit embarrassed to say that I grew up in Kodiak and never have been salmon seining before. I always got done gill netting in the summer, and I thought, nah, I don't want to seine at the end of the summer. I'm good. I had my salmon fix, but I got my job through a mutual fishing connection in Kodiak, kind of beating the docks and just seeing who's going down and doing squid, because I heard it was in sunny California, and that sounded pretty nice. I was at this crux of, do I want to do a winter fishery in Alaska? And that sounded kind of tough.
Cold.
And not that I wasn't up for the challenge, but California just seemed really nice. And so I found a vessel out of Homer that was going down there to do it. And that's kind of how I got my job, is just through word of mouth and, through having fishing experience and some connections in the community, in the fishing community. And I spent 3 months down fishing out of Ventura on the Spartan, and it was like nothing I had experienced. In Alaska, the mountains and landscape is very different than Southern California. So we were fishing out of Ventura near the Channel Islands, and the way that fishery works is we would go out, and squid fishing happens at night, and they have these small vessels that are called light boats. And so light boats will anchor up in spots where, or not anchor up, excuse me, they'll mill around in places where there are squid, or trying to find squid, with these massive lights on the sides of their vessels. And so they pool, or the squid pool underneath them, and they use their equipment on their boat to kind of predict how big this massive squid is underneath their vessel that they're pooling. And they'll call in seine boats once they say, okay, we have a pretty good size amount, or we have a pretty good amount of squid beneath us. So then the seine boat comes out, the skiff tows the net around and circles around the light boat, and once the net's around, the light boat leaves the center of the seine out of the net, so they don't get pursed up, and then the process starts happening of the bottom gets pursed, and then we start hauling the net on. And so I was the lead man that season, and the squid seine nets are much bigger than salmon nets, so they needed to have a mesh person as well while the net is coming on board and coming through the block. There's one person stacking the leads. I had a girl who was stacking the web in the center, and I was stacking the leads. And so once the ball of squid is out the side of the boat, then we put in this large, I can't remember the technical name for it, but like suction. Transvac, there we go. It's been 5 years since I've done that. 7 years now, geez.
Which is just a big hose that sucks it all out.
Right, yeah. And
so
then
sucking directly out of the ocean.
Yep, just sucking directly out of the ocean. So you put that into the purse that you have on the side of the boat, and then it sucks all the squid into the hold, and you hopefully do that a few more times until your boat is full, and then you go and deliver.
Great experience.
Yeah, great experience, wild. And we were also down there during the Ventura fires, which was honestly a little bit frightening, because we got done fishing one night and all of us were behind the Channel Islands, and we kept smelling all this smoke, and at first we thought it was the exhaust. There was a little bit of it, we thought like ash or soot, we thought is what it was, and we're all kind of like having some, not breathing problems, but like the air was coarse, and we were all kind of coughing that night. And it was finally kind of towards, the wind picked up and it was getting pretty rough out there, and so we were like, we're going into the harbor for the night. And we came around the Channel Islands, or as we started heading towards the Channel Islands, this faint glow was behind them. And mind you, it's 2 o'clock in the evening, and so it wasn't sunrise by any means, but we turned the corner.
2 o'clock in the morning.
2 o'clock in the morning. We turn around the islands, and then like the hillside behind Ventura was all on fire, and it just felt very post-apocalyptic, because we're driving in there with, some squid on board, but this whole hillside is on fire, and we're just thinking to ourselves, can we deliver? What's going on? And we also didn't know how far this fire was going to spread, because the wind had picked up, as I said, and it was just blazing through there, and it was really a strange time.
Pictures of that too?
I think I could get you some pictures of that. I'll have to dig into the archive, but yeah.
Okay, what's been your scariest moment at sea?
I think the scariest moment, well, I guess I have two. First summer, when I was 14 and did not have a lot of vessel experience, we were coming out of the channel in Ugashik on a rough day, or I think we were going in to deliver. We didn't have a lot of fish on board, but that channel got so rough, and our boat was just plowing through these probably I guess they were only 8-foot waves. They were nothing crazy, but as a 14-year-old with no fish,
a 32-foot boat and 8-foot waves.
Right, and there was a little bit of weather, but I remember I was in the forepeak, just 14, thinking, "Oh my gosh, we're gonna die." This is it. And I was just thinking, I can't believe my dad would take me out here and we would be doing this. I thought it was supposed to be fun and nice, but I remember being terrified, just not understanding that there was also hard work or weather involved with fishing. I thought, oh, my dad just always goes fishing and comes back with money in the summer and has a bunch of cool stories. He never told me about the reality of it. But, obviously I'm here and we made it in. And in retrospect, it wasn't that bad. I just had never experienced that before. And so that was the first kind of scary experience I had where I feared for my life. But I think one of the more realistic ones where I was, as an adult, where I was like, okay, we're in a little bit of trouble here, is we were fishing over in the Nushagak district up near Clark's Point, and the current around Clark's Point rips, and so there's just very strong movements of water around that area in certain sections that you're fishing. And we set out our 4 nets, and then we realized that we're drifting towards a barge. And so my dad's like, guys, we got to start hauling it. And this current starts sucking us out way faster, and we get 2 of our nets up, and one of our net wraps the front of this tender. And so my dad's trying to pull the net off the barge, but it's wrapped in the anchor line, it's wrapped around, and he's just putting the throttle down on the boat trying to tug it off. And we had to attach the tow line to the last 2 nets. So we had 2 nets on board, and then we clipped the tow line onto the other 2 nets, or to the section that was connected to the 2 nets that were still out in the water. And as this current has us, as the tide is coming up and the weather's picking up, we're trying to tow off, but what's happening is the boat starts leaning. There was too much tension on the net that was stuck on the barge, and so our boat started tipping on its starboard side because we were just pushing too much against it. And so my dad just shouts down to us, he's like, cut the line, jump up there and cut the Vicky. And at this point we're getting to probably like a 70-60 degree angle that the boat's pulling against the gear, and I jump up there and slice the tow line off, and that net snaps, the rest of the tow line snaps, and shackle gets all bent, and there was just so much tension on it that had we kept towing, there was the possibility that we might have just gone horizontal, which you don't want to be on a boat. You want to be vertical in the water, I guess. But yeah, that was one of the scarier moments where lost some nets. Barge was pretty upset with us, but what can you do in weather? It just happens.
At least you survived it.
Yeah, definitely.
Seems like every year, or every couple years anyway, up here, someone doesn't.
Yeah.
In fact, we've just experienced that recently.
Yeah, I know. Very disappointing.
So, well, we're on the topic. What is the sea taking away from you?
My dad and my uncles came to Alaska in the 70s, and they, my aunt was actually the first one to come to Alaska and work in the slime line in Kodiak, Alaska, and she married up in this world and married a Bering Sea crabber, and a guy who came from a crabbing family in Kodiak, and fished king crab on the island when that fishery was still around, or red crab. And so my uncles followed suit, because one season my aunt said, well, my husband needs a crew. Do you guys want to come up? So my dad and his 2 brothers became the crew of this crab vessel, and that's really how they got into the industry. But what the sea has taken away from me is in 99, my uncle's boat, who my aunt married, went down in the Bering Sea. It was called the Linjay, and I never had the pleasure of meeting him, I guess, where I can remember, but that was a pretty tough loss for my family. And so that's, I guess, what the sea is in terms of direct family members.
Family.
Yeah, taken family. And so that was an interesting to hear that growing up, growing up with the respect for the ocean or the industry, that it can be a lot of fun. It can be a lot of money and profitable, but it can be very, very dangerous work. And so that's what the sea's taken away from me. And I think in a lighter sense, the sea's taken away the ability to lead any sort of 9-to-5 office life. Once you get involved with fishing, and if you really like it, find your niche and in which industry you like, it's really hard to go back to a desk job after that.
Pretty good days sometimes.
Yeah, definitely.
And Ugashik is probably my favorite river.
Yeah.
The locals, when you get a down day, because there's a lot of days with closures there. And you go into Dago Creek and you tie up to the dock where every other boat's tied up to. You're rafting 5 out. And you go up and there's one store there, right? But the locals are so cool.
Yeah, definitely. My dad always called Ugashik the wild card district, and man, I think going back to the frustration that I would feel as a teenager is there were some seasons where we would wait 5 days in July, 7 days, even 12 days is the longest I've ever waited in that river for a fishing opener. And when you hear ADF&G announce all the catch harvests in the other districts, and you're sitting in Ugashik having watched Game of Thrones season 1 5 times in a row, you start to get a little bit stir crazy. And so, I don't know, it's always been such an interesting district to fish in, and my dad always said, Ugashik will provide, you just got to stick it out and make it count.
Stick and stay.
Yeah, stick and stay.
Well, Ugashik has those big days.
Yeah.
That makes up for...
It does.
Those Game of Thrones days.
Yes, seriously.
Okay, Nels, how would you suggest someone that would like to get into our industry, what would be the starting point for them? They don't have any family connections.
Right. Yeah. That's, one thing, it feels like people get into fishing in Alaska in 2 different ways. Either, they're from Alaska and have a community connection, or they have a family connection. And most people don't have that. But I've met a vast amount of people who, have started in canneries and worked their way onto vessels, making good connections. Now in the day and age of social media, there's all these Facebook pages that are both very entertaining, sometimes very questionable in what is said on them, but then people find their jobs through social media as well, which I think is wild. And then there's the good old-fashioned way of showing up to a fishing community with a good fleet and beating the docks. Kodiak, there's a couple coffee shops and bars just right around the harbor downtown, and I remember going into these establishments and seeing the walls of people looking for jobs, people looking for crew, and so I still think there is a good amount of word of mouth and kind of dock walking that you can do to get a job in this day and age. But social media definitely tends to be a new avenue that people are taking to get jobs.
It really is.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, what is it? Boats of Dutch Harbor's one, Bristol Bay jobs. And
jobs, rumors, BS,
yeah.
Yep.
So there's those. So thanks for pointing those out.
Definitely.
Now, I know you're pretty passionate about this area.
Mm-hmm.
I know you're passionate about the fishery.
Yeah.
So I'm going to give you it's time for your final thoughts.
Okay.
So, let's talk about what's your passion here.
Going back to kind of what the sea's given me, or more of what Bristol Bay's given me, is, growing up in this industry, spending time in the boatyards, spending time with my uncles, my family, now my wife, her family, and hopefully my daughter. I mean, Bristol Bay's given me so much outside of just a job, outside of a paycheck. It's really given me a family, a community, and a place that I really care about. And so what I do in my off season is I do a lot of habitat protection work in the region, mainly like forest salmon habitat.
You live here.
Yeah. I guess I.
Yeah, we skipped that whole part.
Yeah, I guess we skipped that part. I grew up in Kodiak, met my wife, and during COVID times we moved back to Naknek, and so for the last 4 years I've lived here, and last fall we relocated to Connecticut while my wife's in graduate school. So that's just a little blip in the radar, but most recently lived in Naknek, and that was exciting to come to this community and live here year-round outside of just the salmon season. But yeah, kind of while living in Naknek is when I started this habitat protection work for salmon habitat, because one thing that I believe we need to understand and respect as Bristol Bay fishermen is that we have this amazing fishery and these incredible runs because we have all of this pristine habitat for these salmon to return to and to spawn in. And a lot of work I've done is against the pebble mine, working on ways to organize fishermen, do some grassroots organizing.
Explain the pebble mine. A lot of our listeners probably don't know what that is.
Oh, yes. So the pebble mine is a proposed mine at the headwaters of Bristol Bay, up near Lake Iliamna, just due north of that. And so if you look on a map, you can see the largest of Alaska, you can see the largest freshwater lake, Iliamna, and in that land right above it is where Northern Dynasty, a foreign-owned mining company from Canada, wants to develop a low-grade deposit of ore of copper, gold, and molybdenum. And so we've been fighting this battle for 30 years, fishermen, tribes, Alaskans, because our fear, and the science says that if this mine is put into place, the toxins that could be released from the type of mining into the water would degrade it, and salmon need clean water to spawn. Not to mention that they would build a large tailings pond dam, which is this large earthen dam where they put all of their byproduct from mining. And so that sits in this dam in perpetuity forever. And as I mentioned the volcanoes earlier in this chat of ours, we live in a seismically active zone here in Bristol Bay on the Ring of Fire.
Ring of Fire.
Yeah. And so earthen dams and tectonic activity doesn't really sound like a great mix to me. I don't know about you, Mark. But, there's widespread opposition in the region from fishermen, from tribes, from local communities. And it's important in the work that I've been doing to keep our finger on the pulse of what's going on with this mine in particular. And so that's what kind of drives me. I have the opportunities to talk with local, state, and federal representatives about Bristol Bay, about our incredible fishery and our sustainable economy that we have out here, and just what we're really putting at risk if this mine were to go into place. And so that's a little bit about Pebble Mine. If anyone wants to know more, our organization's website is cfbb.org, and that's a great resource for fishermen to find community, to learn more about threats to the industry, but also a cool place to see awesome photos and get information about what's going on in the industry. And so if people want to know more, they can visit cfbb.org. But that's, I think, final thoughts is really, we're so lucky here in Bristol Bay to have the runs that we still do. If you look at historically the Chignik salmon fishery and the steep decline of fish there to the south of us, you look to the Yukon-Kuskokwim river system and delta and the crisis that they're facing with salmon not returning there. To the north and south of us, we're seeing problems with fish and fisheries.
Neither are caused by a mine.
Neither are caused by a mine. No, this is separate outside of the mine. But what we have here in Bristol Bay is special. And I just firmly believe that we have to figure out ways to protect this industry outside of the mine, protect what we have out here, keep fishermen fishing, keep salmon returning, and keep building this culture and economy that we have out here.
For me, I think the state of Alaska does better than anyone in protecting the resource.
Yes.
But I think its people fight.
Yes.
To protect the habitat.
I agree completely.
If you ever go to the ADFG meetings in Anchorage, there are more natives there telling their stories about how their great grandfather. These are hundreds of years.
Yeah.
Of stories, and you're just continuing it.
Exactly. Yeah, there's a lot to protect. I think we always think about salmon as commercial fishermen as money, and that's, in this day and age, that's normal, But I think I think living here year round was a big shift in my mentality about salmon and about fishing, because I had always come to Bristol Bay as a quote unquote outsider, someone who comes here and fishes, makes my money, and leaves. And then after I lived here, I really realized how salmon create this social and economic fabric out here as well. I'm not sure I should say this on air for any of the Bristol Bay fishermen listening, but I did work the tax job at the borough for a little bit, and so I was in charge of understanding and reporting on raw fish taxes. So, we go out there as fishermen and make our money, but some of that money goes back to the community. And so that was the first look into...
As it should.
You're right.
I mean, come on.
But that was the first look into how salmon and the money that comes from them keep our roads intact, make sure that all the wastewater and power that is needed for these cannery facilities comes back to the community and gives back to it. But then even deeper than that, it's a big social thing for people, going down to their nets outside of commercially harvesting and harvesting for subsistence purposes, or to put fish in their freezers for the winter, to smoke them in their smokehouses. I mean, it becomes more than money. It becomes, wow, this is what makes us kind of who we are. This is an important part of Bristol Bay outside of the monetary aspect. So
I'm only ever here. I'm the outsider, right? I come
Right.
in, make my money, and leave.
yeah.
What is it? What was it like to just be? Because I can't imagine it. There are thousands of people here now,
Yes.
but there are only hundreds of people here later.
Right. Yeah. And so that's one aspect of Bristol Bay that's extremely fascinating. In communities here like Naknek, year-round population of Naknek village, or like Naknek proper, is I think about 450 people. King Salmon's 300 to 400, and South Naknek's less than 50, I believe. And so we're less than 1,000 people in these three communities total. But in the summertime, we swell to 8,000, 9,000, 10,000. I don't have the exact number, but it's in the thousands between fishermen, cannery workers, lodges, tourists that come through for Katmai. I mean, it's crazy in the summertime because the fish are returning and they're bringing back the economy, the tourism, the lodges. The bears are out for Katmai. But in the wintertime, it gets really quiet, and it's peaceful. It's beautiful. About late August, early September. Yeah.
I just had a thought. You said it gets really quiet, and I just thought, his baby was born in August. It's really cold in January.
It is. Oh, yeah. I think you pieced it together. Yes,
heck?
I was gonna say it's quiet, and it's also it's quiet, it's peaceful, and it's cold.
And
but
dark.
it's crazy in the summertime. You're driving in between Naknek, King Salmon are around, and there's lots of vehicles. There's lots of action. There's boats being hauled on the roads to launch. But come September, you can drive from Naknek to King Salmon and not see anyone, and it kind of feels like your own little piece of the world, I guess, in a way. And so it's quiet, but man, some of the winters, the coldest I've seen it out here with wind chill is like -42, and you can't go outside in that.
Well, it's dark too a lot, right? Like right now, we get 4 or 5 hours of darkness. at
Yeah.
night.
And in the wintertime, it's the opposite, You're getting maybe 4 and 5 hours of daylight with dusk and dawn included, and that can be
Depressing.
depressing. It can
Or it can make you father children.
True.
Just keep thinking.
But it's one of those things where it feels like in the summertime when the sun's up all the time, we're working,
Yeah.
we're making our money, we're fishing. It's a busy season, and then in the wintertime it's the downtime. It's where you can pick up your hobbies. It's where you can get your day job. It's where you can just spend some time recovering or planning your next big thing for the next salmon season, whether that's a boat project or really anything. And so it's a unique life. It has a very big high in the summertime and a low in the wintertime. But it's kind of how it is.
Thanks for explaining that to us.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks for asking.
Nels, I really enjoyed this.
Thank you, Mark.
New avenues, squid we haven't heard about.
Yeah.
The local life,
Yeah.
really good. Anything else you'd like to share?
No, I'd just like to thank you for your time today, Mark. And it was great chatting with you today.
Okay. All right, guys. Thanks for listening. And I haven't said it in a while, but follow us on Instagram. We're trying to get that number up just a little bit. And we'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening to Galley Stories. We hope you like what the net brought in. Please leave us a review on iTunes. Whether you like it or not, we're not fishing for compliments. Look us up on Facebook and Twitter too, and reach out to us at galleystories@gmail.com.